So today I'm going to share some memories about Mansari, and also I've previously done a session about Padri, in which I did some meandering and talked about Mohamed the Mast a little bit. So I'm also going to meander again and talk about a little more about Mohamed, but essentially this is about Mansari. Mansari was born on, August 17th, 1909, and she passed away January 12th, 1997. She first met Baba in 1927. She joined Baba in 1937 as one of the Mandali. And in 1949, she asked Baba if she could live on Merabat Hill. And he said yes. And he restricted her. She was not to come down from the hill. I have a picture to show you of myself with Mansari. You can see how short she was. And I'm under 6 feet. Just some other sources that people can go to learn more about Mansari. Lord Maher has a little section. It's a beautiful book which was out of print called Lives of Love. It has to do with stories about the women Mandali collected by Judith Garbutt from Australia, recently put back in print by Eric Tepperman. It's a great book. I think it's pages 68 to 72. There's not much video of Mansari. There is some. Maybe more has come out that I'm not aware of. So, anyway, also Marty McCabe, after Mansari passed on, wrote a really nice piece. James Cox also. So actually, I think before I talk more about Mansari, I'll talk a little about Mohamed the Mast. So this story I'm going to tell about Mohamed the Mast happened in 1986 at Mira's birthday program. It was held at the outdoor theater just off the side of Baba's Samadhi on the hill, maybe 100 yards away, if that. And I was not feeling well that day, so I lugged down a chair to sit in so I would have a comfortable seat. And I sat down and felt relieved, and someone came up to me and said, "May I have your seat?" You know how Baba works. And I felt like saying, well, I'm not well and this and that, but the person was handicapped, and you know, in a second's time, the mind went back and forth. Should I explain my situation, or should I just give up the seat? And I decided I would give up the seat. And I said, yes, take my seat. So I had him, what I thought was a much worse position, and certainly a less comfortable one. And what happens? All of a sudden, someone I was quite close to, named Dun Sata, Eric's cousin, has the seat beside me. The men Mandali are sitting in front of me. To the right of Dun Sata is Mohamed the Mast. Mohamed the Mast had said to Erico, his caregiver, I want to go to Mira's birthday play. He had never asked before, and I am to wear a white scarf around my head. So they bring him in the car and then put him in the wheelchair and wheel him up. I talked with Dun Sata afterwards, and she said she was so frightened because she had muscular dystrophy and was helpless. And she was worried he could get fiery or something or upset. But she said throughout the play, he kept saying to Erico, Are you sure she's comfortable? Make her comfortable. Is she okay? He was very chivalrous and kind. And I was sitting, as I mentioned before, right behind the men Mandali, who were in a relaxed mood. They didn't have to be on for us. Some of them were chewing pan, maybe taking a little snuff and nudging each other at the funny parts of the play. It actually wasn't just one play that year, it was several skits. And for the first time, some of the skits were in Marathi so that the local Arangalan people and other people that just spoke Marathi could enjoy it as well. And when they did a skit about Beauty and the Beast came out, I think it was played by Ted Judson, Mohamed got very excited and his eyes are sparkling and he's going, it was, I had the best seat in the house, is the long and short of it. I should have brought a picture. I did take a picture. So that is that story about Mohamed. Another story Meru told me. Now the women Mandali back in the 70s and 80s, maybe later on, would come out every second Wednesday. It was referred to as the Women's Arti. And of course we pilgrims would come as well. Anyway, after this particular arti, they walked through Old Mandali Hall in Lower Mehrabad, where Mohamed had his residence right in the hall at the time, not in the room off the side. And he's sitting there on the edge of his bed with his head down, and Meher has the thought, he doesn't even know we're here, he's in a different world. All of a sudden, with that, Mohamed picks up his head, stares at Mera and says, Baba's favorite, puts his head back down. Oh my. So I had this bag I bought in the bazaar, and it has a picture of the Saint Mirabai. And someone had tried to poison her. It's a known depiction of her taking the saucer with the poison in it and going to drink it, not knowing it's poison. And Krishna, a little Krishna, appears and protects her. And anyway, Mohamed was with Eriko and I was there. And Mohamed asked if he wanted to see the bag. So he took the bag and then he immediately put it behind his back like a little kid, like he can't have it back. And then Eriko said, do you want the bag back? And I thought, oh, what a problem. A great must has asked for my bag, I should give it to him. But then again, it had sentimental value. And I'll tell that reason later when I do a segment on Mera in connection with the bag. So I asked for the bag back and got it back, and I have it to this day. So Mohamed could be in fiery moods, and if he didn't know you, you were supposed to stand clear. And one day I was just alone with him on the veranda from some distance so I wouldn't bother him. And all of a sudden he got up and started walking down the veranda, all hunched over as he was at the time. And I could either run in the opposite direction or stand there. I kind of stood there and froze, and he's coming right by me, and I thought he's going to say, like, "Ciao," like, get away. And he's all hunched over, and when he gets by me, he puts his head up, he says, "Jai Baba," and he carries on. It was very sweet. Nicer than the tale I relate, although not as funny, of the time that he called me a madman. So you have to watch the Padre video for that. Now, I'll finish up with one more story about Mohamed. That is, I'll finish with the Mohamed segment. And that is, it was back in the 70s, and we had our 4 days out at Mehrabad, and 11 or 12 of us. You know, we were all living in town back then because there was no pilgrim center. And in the middle of the night and throughout the night we heard this singing in this kind of delicate yet whispery voice. And it went on and on and on. It was the same verse over and over and over. And the next day, myself and one of my roommates asked Erico, was that Mohamed the Must singing? And he said yes. And he told us what the words were that he was singing. He called Baba Dada. He was singing Dada's Up on the Hill. And the tune went like this. Dada's up on the hill, Dada's up on the hill. Singing to Baba. It was just hauntingly beautiful. So now, back to the main person for this talk, Mansari. Mansari, now a couple of these stories at least are well known, but they're just such classics, I'm going to include them as well. Mansari, growing up, never went to school. She didn't have a formal education, and yet she was sharp as a whip. And the reason she didn't go, in India, sometimes women are not afforded, especially back then, afforded the opportunity that boys were to have an education. But the reason in her case, from what I understand, was that she had a skin disease. And the long and short of this story is that when she was young, Baba told her to take some of his duniash every day for a certain length of time, and that the skin disease would go away. And it did. And then what happened after that is word came that Baba got the skin disease, which freaked her out. And so she wanted it back. But Baba did the best thing possible, and not only did he not give it back to her, he got rid of it himself. But for the time being, he had taken it on himself. It seems like in order to get rid of it in her. This helped draw her closer to Baba. So she didn't know English at all, but as I say, she was very smart. And from what I understand, she learned English, picking it up from the Westerners who would come and talk, and also from reading novels that they would give her in English. So that's secondhand information, but I believe it's accurate. I used to think of Mansari as the drop-in Mandali. She lived up on the hill, and we called it Mansari's kitchen, where we would meet her. And we'd open the green doors, and I can hear that creak now, the green doors. She'd say, "Come in, come in." Didn't matter what she was doing, almost always it was come in, sit down. She would make some tea, we'd have snacks. It was idyllic and lovely. And so she would say, "Regular customer." She'd laugh when you come in. She knew you well. And when I come back for succeeding pilgrimages, she'd say, "Creager, rhymes with trigger." And then she'd go, pretend to shoot me, and then laugh. So she had a great sense of humor. And this is pretty well known, but I'm sure not everybody knows it. Adi Kairani would say, Mansari says, "Don't marry, be happy." And I, Adi, say, "Do marry, be sorry." But there are certain persons who say, "Don't worry, marry and be sorry." Of course, they respected the institution of marriage. They were having fun. So Adi always used to say, if a man isn't married, he's incomplete. If he is married, he's finished. And this has nothing to do with their sense of humor, but it has to do with something that Brahms said. It's funny in my mind when I think of some of these classical composers, I think of them as being sort of very serious, because the music is often very serious. Anyway, Brahms said, "Unfortunately, I am not married, and therefore I am, thank God, a bachelor." Mansari would repeat Baba's name, I think 20,000 times a day, much less than Kaikabad. Just to meander a little bit about Kaikabad, who also lived in the hill, on the hill. By Baba's order, he said Baba's name 100,000 times a day. He had a system where he would go by each joint very, very fast. And he had experiences, and Baba said, despite his having spiritual experiences, he is one of my Mandali. Because Baba generally veiled them from experiences, not always. I only saw Mansari counting Baba's name one time. What happened was, after evening arti, I was going down to the Pilgrimage Center for dinner, and we had to leave the hill after arti. You couldn't stay up there. And when I got back, I realized I forgot my little knapsack. So I went back looking for it, and I had left it in Mansari's kitchen. And there she was. She didn't see that someone was coming, and she was doing the counting 20,000 times. She used to say his name, which plays the game, major, minor, final. Then she'd giggle. So people used to say, Mansari, you make the best tea. She was always making us tea and snacks. One thing we called plastic, because it looked like plastic. I think it was made from a kind of a gelatinous type thing called agar. At least that's the English name for it. But the tea, she would always giggle and she'd say, it's whatever tea anyone happens to give me at the time. And it was usually like this low quality tea with twigs in it and stuff. But you were in such a happy place. Just Baba did something to the tea, I guess. Or he did something to us through it. So, sometime in the 80s, I think, screens were put up over the windows, which were basically open except for non-movable bars into her kitchen. And so birds would fly in when we would sit in the kitchen, sparrows, and there'd be crumbs or seeds on the floor. And so we'd have a real treat watching the birds and talking with Mansari. She had an eclectic combination of chairs, wooden chairs, and stools to sit on. If you were the last person in and there were no other seats, you'd be sitting on a stool. Who cared? She had this one chair which had it was like a drape and looked very uncomfortable. It's the one she liked. And in fact, she would sleep in it at night, not in her bed, for the longest time. There's also, as far as I know to this day, a green painted wooden chair that it's not roped off, that Baba used to sit in, so you can sit in it. One of the things that Mansari would say sometimes when I would arrive, and she would say it to other people too, I'm pretty sure that she knew well, she'd say, you and I are old cronies, or is it old crows? And then she'd laugh. Crows are not looked upon in a great light by many Indians. Let's see. So Mansari kept, she had a name for it, something like Baba family photo albums or something. She'd collect photos of the Baba lovers who would come on pilgrimage. And it was fun to look through those and see all the photographs. I remember she got quite upset because someone apparently took one of the albums and never brought it back. So that was quite upsetting to her. She used to say, Baba's very tricky, and she had a name for him that I can't remember, Tricky something or other. I'll give you an example. She came from a conservative family, and she could be pretty strict, but she also had this real fun side. And one day at evening arty, I went in, it was my turn to go in and bow down and come out and sit there for the rest of the arty while music is playing. And when I came out of the samadhi, I was kind of blissed out. Kind of half didn't know where I was. And I'm just walking, and all of a sudden I realize I have to stop because someone's put their leg up to stop me. It was Mansari putting her leg up and giggling. And then that kind of helped bring me back to earth. Plus it was fun. She was having fun, and so was I. So, back in the day in the 70s at Artie's, we could all fit inside the tomb. We weren't outside under the portico facing the samadhi. And we'd be in two lines on either side of the marble slab right up against the far wall and all the way back to the door. If there were that many people, there weren't always that many people. And when it was time to go out one at a time, people would sort of make a move, but then someone else would be quicker, and then they wave back. So it was like these trees, like it's a little hard to explain. Anyway, and back then, all these songs weren't necessarily spiritual adoration types of songs. It was a bit more free. Sometimes we just sat in the portico in a little circle. And also inside the tomb, it was more informal. People would even lay down in there, read the newspaper in there. And, people around Baba were very natural and very free. But as time went on, it became more devotional. And that's a good thing too, I think. I really do. And yet still there are no restrictions on how you have to go into Baba in the tomb. I've seen people crawl in. I'm going to tell a story about someone entering the tomb. One day I came out of the tomb, and I often like to, as I exit, just outside the tomb, bow down at the threshold with my head one last time. As I did that, someone bumped into me in their hurry, I thought, to get into the tomb, and stepped on my hand, bumped me again, and walked in. So I was stunned, and how could someone do this? A couple days later, I found out the man was blind. It was actually Nanakar's brother, Vinukar, professor, very nice man. So it's easy to make a wrong evaluation. So yes, I mentioned Nanakar, by the way. He would assist up at the tomb, Mansari, and was the man who would greet you when you first came and say, "Welcome home," with such feeling and heart that it really affected us. A great man. I remember when he was in the hospital, I think it was a heart attack in his 80s. He said, "I want to live to serve Baba till I'm 100. So he didn't make it, but boy, sure glad that he was there. So another interesting person on the hill was Kaikabad, one of Baba's Mandali. As I mentioned, he was to repeat Baba's name under his order 100,000 times a day. And he could see and read in the pitch dark from light that Baba gave him. And one day, he thought there was a scorpion on his foot. It ended up just being an ant, and he went to kick it, and boom, he fell down and had a serious leg or hip break. Baba said, "That's to share in my suffering." And he continued to repeat Baba's name just all the time. I didn't really get to know him. I would see him. He died while I was there. I was away traveling in another part of India at the time he actually passed on. But his two daughters, Gulu and Jalu, I would see them pushing him in this wheelchair on Mehrabad Hill during the day. It was an old wooden wheelchair that after one of Baba's accidents he used. And then Pendu, after Pendu was in a car accident with Baba, Pendu used. And then, of course, Kaikabad. So here were these two eccentric daughters who would make their own clothes, not very well, I might add, but delightful to us in its own way. And they were Baba wanted them to have an austere life, a simple life. And they were simple, loving, unusual individuals. Anyway, so they'd be pushing Kaikabad in the wheelchair, who had on this Parsi cap, very dark sunglasses, and the hill was bumpy, and his mouth would hang open because he was old and not well. So they're pushing him along, and there's Kaikabad. Some scene indeed. But yes, now I was present when his wife Jerbai died after him. And they wanted the body. I remember seeing the body. They lived in the building, the Dasturs, Kaikabad and his family, right behind the tomb there. Not 100 feet away, I would say. I remember seeing the body there, and it was in need of cremation right away. But they wanted to be, instead of taking it directly in the car down to the cremation grounds in Lower Mehrabad, they wanted it to circle 5 times or something like that around the Samadhi. And Aaron said, no, this body needs to be taken care of right now. So that didn't happen, but it was brought down to the cremation grounds. And as the body on a stretcher was taken out of the vehicle, I happened to be right behind the body, right next to Pendu. And I was not familiar with some of the Mandali's ways at that point. And Pendu taps the body or the stretcher with the body on it with his cane, looks at me and says, with his speech impediment due to his stroke or accident, I'm not sure which, he gives me a wry smile and he says, "Why is she so lucky?" So, oh my. Let's see. Okay, getting back to Mansari and another incident with someone's physical death. We knew that Banu Masi, a close lover of Baba's, was dying, but we didn't know when she was going to die. And this might have been in the 90s when she died. Anyway, I'm thinking, oh, I hope she doesn't die on Baba's birthday. It could spoil the atmosphere. It's the way this stupid noggin was working at the time. Anyway, so we all get up early for Baba's birthday. It's still dark out. And the arti has not begun at the Samadhi, so I go over to Mansari's kitchen. Mansari says, "Have you heard the news? Banu Masi died on Baba's birthday. She must be a mathematician." And it didn't ruin the atmosphere at all. I remember seeing the body later on that day down at Lower Maribad, and it just looked like it was a casing, an outer casing. It also had a big smile, the body on its face. Huh. Oh, I remember also Mansari said they had different phrases, the Mandali, for when one of them passed on. I think she said she got her visa. Sometimes they would say the person got their passport or the person won the race. So, okay, moving right along. Mansari lived simply and had simple dress, usually just a white sari, might have a little rip in it or whatnot, and old sandals. And every once in a while someone would say, "Oh, Mansari, I'd be happy to buy you some new clothes." Didn't interest her in the least. I mean, she would dress up for, special occasions and things sometimes. So, let's see. She had some sayings or views on things. I remember her asking me late in life, she said, in the airplanes, is it cold up there in the airplanes because it's further away from the earth or something? No, Mansari. And when you get up to walk around, do you float? Do your feet go off the ground? Do you float around? I think it might have been partly that she was older. Maybe when she was younger, she would have known more about such things, but I'm not sure. There was something else I was going to say. Oh, she would say, US is push-button city. Everything click, so. And then she'd say that she could tell oftentimes Baba lovers from big cities as opposed to those who weren't, because the people from big cities tend to be rush. Well, it's been nice seeing you, Mansari, you gotta go. And I remember sometimes people would say, I'd say, I saw you left after a short period of time. They said, yeah, I heard the story before, But for most of us, we do not mind at all hearing the stories again and again. It was the atmosphere that mattered. And that's not to put down people that left early. So I remember Mansari used to say Khurshid had such a beautiful voice. And she hadn't heard her sing since so long ago. Because Khurshid didn't, when Khurshid moved back from Bombay, I don't know what year that was, she didn't go out to the women's arties. She was going blind and had other problems. So Huey MacDonald decided he would record her and bring out the music for Mansari to hear. So he did that, and I happened to be there when she was listening to it for the first time. There's little Mansari, about 4'2" or whatever. She kept shrinking every year. So anyway, with these big earphones on, it was like from another generation. Anyway, and she's tapping her toe and moving her head. We can't hear the music, she can. And she enjoyed it, but afterwards, Huey or somebody said, how did you like the music? She said, oh, very good, but she's not as good as she used to be. Oh, my. So, let's see. She would talk about Upasani now and then. When she was growing up in Navsari, by the way, her name was Manu Desai. And Baba, since she was from Navsari, and there were other Manus, he changed her name to Mansari, combination of Navsari and Manu. And I think on her gravesite it just says Mansari. So growing up, she said Upasni would travel some distance, and about once a year he would visit their family. And Mansari growing up was not so much a Baba lover as the rest of the family until the things happened, like the issues with her skin, and Baba reeled her in. Anyway, I can't remember for sure if I'm confusing where he sat with his visits to Minu Barocha or his visits to Mansari and her family. But in one of those two incidences, he would sit in the corner on his burlap sack. He was a true fakir, living a life of simplicity and poverty. Anyway, when he would visit once a year at Mansari's, she said he had a sense of humor. I remember one example she gave anyway. She said he would sit there and he'd say, "I can't think of anything to say." And he'd go like this with his But yeah, one doesn't think of Upasni by and large as a man with a great sense of humor. Also, one doesn't tend to see pictures of him smiling, but there is I should have brought the picture of him with a nice big smile on his face. He also, for work he had to do, would dress up as a woman. It's not a pretty picture, because he was such a yang dude. I remember Erico telling me a story about Upasni. He said he married the sun. I think that might have been when he dressed up as a woman. And he had a bucket of water which captured the reflection of the sun and had a whole ceremony. I think he also married the Kanyas, the nuns. Probably had to do with part of his work of freaking out and breaking down the Muslims' orthodoxy. He also had actually in the body, I think, I haven't finished his biography, 3, maybe 4 wives. One would die, this and that. An unusual history. But I think I'll leave that at that about Upasni. I could say a lot more, but let me get back to Mansari. Mansari would give us little tours of Upper Mehrabad. And if you went to her and said, you know, Mansari, I'd like to go into the cage room, which is up on the hill, in the same building where Kaikabad lived. It used to be the hospital building. There was a mast ashram there at one time. And within that building, as many know, but maybe not everybody that's watching this, Baba had constructed a cage made out of bamboo post and kind of a gauze type cloth with a hole in it, because he was doing seclusion work in there. And he would poke his alphabet board out that and point to it so people could not see him, just see his hand. And there was only 1 or 2 people, I think, that could do that. A man named Krishna Nair was one of them. What was I going to say? Oh, so anyway, Mansari would take us over there, and she said she had such respect for that cage room. It had such an atmosphere, still does. She would say, "To me, this room is like a chapel." So, anyway, you can still, I don't know now with COVID if it's the case right now, but you can still take the weekly Mehrabad tour and go in the chapel, in the cage room. Okay, this is a known story. It's been written up a little askew, and I haven't gone back and reread my notes about the incident myself. But this is it as best as I remember. She would tell this oftentimes. When Baba went away for the new life, he told Mansari, I'm not coming back, like he told everybody. And in case there's some intruders, I want you to have a stick nearby to beat off the intruder. Because she was up there pretty much alone. I think Kai Kebab was there at that time, but they stayed separate in their own building. So anyway, one night, she feels something on her chest, and she's sleeping, so she brushes it aside. And then again in her sleep, she feels it there, and she looks, and it's a cobra on her chest, looking at her in the eyes. And so she brushes it aside and goes and gets a stick, but in her state that she was in, instead of getting the big stick she had, she went and got one of the little firewood sticks and managed to kill it. And at that time, there was a lot of tall grass in that area. And so she goes outside and throws the dead cobra in the tall grass. And that turned out to be problematic, because she said the cobra's mate saw what had happened, and for day after day would circle the building. Apparently, she'd say it made a noise like, I didn't know cobras could do that. And it was freaking her out. This went on day after day after day. And if I remember correctly, on the 11th day, she said, Baba, I can't stand it anymore. Either kill the cobra or get rid of the cobra or get rid of me. The cobra never came back. But also I forgot this part. During the night, after she first brushed off the cobra, she eventually had gone back to sleep at some point, and she woke up and saw Baba sitting there on the edge of her bed looking at her, obviously protecting her. So it wasn't a human intruder that caused the mischief. So I'm going to meander a little bit because I have another cobra story that doesn't have to do with Mansari or anybody. But one day I'm out at Merazad and I need to go to the toilet. And as I'm just about there to the toilet, a person opens the door to come out. The person sees me, leaves the door open. I go in, do my business, come out. Word comes that Mara's on the porch. There would be an announcement whenever she came out on the porch. And people who were in Mandali Hall were there or elsewhere. Many would go over to be with Mara. On this day, I went over too for about an hour and came back over afterwards to see this little crowd. And I went over, and it was Alaba killing a cobra. Well, it so happened that that cobra was in the toilet when I was in there, and the person who was in right before me saw it on a ledge just up above the doorway inside, didn't say anything to me, thought about it after an hour, and told Alaba or the Mandali, and then they killed it. So, that's my story. It was not a big cobra, but I found out later they're just as poisonous when they're small. Okay. Now Mansari, Baba ordered Mansari to memorize poetry from Kabir. I don't know if it was couplets or whole poems, but as I mentioned, she was very smart. And she memorized this incredible number of them and would recite them, and Baba would say, number 123, and then she'd recite that one. So, Mansari told me this later on, not one of my first visits or two. that Baba had her keep silence, and I may be mistaken. I think it was for a full year. She didn't normally talk about it, at least not in my experience. And I said, Mansari, did you ever slip up? She said, no. So, let's see. I'm going to guess maybe a couple of years before she passed on. She had, I think it was a heart attack, I'm not sure, and her memory went. And it came back later on. And she used to joke about how it went and came back. She would say, I would say they would talk about the tomb, because she was she was in charge of the tomb and its cleaning and the people that assisted with it. And she would say, what's over there? She even forgot that that was Baba's tomb, and she would giggle at the fact that she would forget. But it all came back to her, and it seemed like 100% to me. When she was dying, I wasn't there in that visit. Bob had promised her, she said, that he said to her, you will hear me speak before you die. But Mansari said, what's the difference? I'm so deaf that I couldn't hear him now if he did. Oh. So, one day after Baba dropped the body, Padre was up on the hill, and he saw Mansari had a bedspread or sheet outside, and there was stuff on it. And what it was flower dust from flowers that had been in contact with Baba's body before they covered it up. Dirt that had been in contact, dirt from the tomb that had been in contact with his body, and duni ash, some of which was mixed in from the 1954 duni that Baba lit. And so Padre comes up, and I don't know if he used this phrase now, but sometimes he would say, woman, what are you doing? And she said, I'm mixing up on these and putting into these 3 vials the flower dust, the dirt, and the duni ash, because, people will come, and Baba lovers will come from all over the world, and they'll want some. And Padre's there, are you kidding me? They just couldn't imagine, some of them, that all of us would come. And I remember, just times when there were more of us, there were more Mandali than pilgrims when we go out to Mirazad. So I never knew this until after Mansari passed on, but she was so fond of the duni that she would go all the way down to the railroad tracks to watch it sometimes. And, Baba had ordered her not to cross the tracks, except for certain special contingencies. And I think she would dress up on that occasion too. So I remember Mansari saying that a time would come when the queue to Baba's Samadhi would stretch all the way back to the railway station, and that people's time would be up. Their, say, 3 weeks of vacation time, and they will not have made it all the way up to the Samadhi in order to bow down at the threshold, and they'd have to settle for picking up some dirt from where they last stood and taking that back home. There's another similar story by Savak Kotwal, one of Baba's lesser-known Mandali, to the effect of how long the line would be. I don't have it in my memory right now. but it was a similar type story. So, yes, Mansari loved the Dooney, and she passed on Dooney Day, January 12th, 1997. Still remember where I was when I heard the news. A few more things. So, Mansari had a fiery temper and was extra conservative about certain things. And Baba said, "You change your temper or I won't bring you back with me next time I come." And she would joke and say, "Oh Baba, when you come back next time and you descend from the heavens and your sadhana is like a parachute, I will just hold on and come with you." And Baba would say, "I'm not joking, you've got to change." And then later on, Baba said, "I'll change your nature like the difference between the firmament and the depths." And I remember, things like she didn't like long hair on guys, and inappropriate, or what she deemed inappropriate dress was not okay. She was upset at the electrification, even though Baba had ordered it of Mehrabad. See, Minu Barocha had put in the electricity, but not got it going until maybe 79 or 1980, I'm not sure. Anyway, later on, she just laughed off things like long hair and things like that. And I remember saying to her, because I had commiserated with her before about the electricity, I like the simplicity. And I said, "Yeah, it's a shame, isn't it, Mansari, that we have this electricity now." And she said, "Oh no, it's necessary for all you people coming." He had changed her temperament, is the point I'm making. Baba, one of the nicknames he had for her was Chili Pepper, because of her temper. Another one was, I had them written down somewhere here, Baba's Watchdog. He also nicknamed Agnes Barron in Mayher Mound out in California Baba's Watchdog. The two of them liked each other, and they would write letters to each other. And the one watchdog would write to the other and back and forth. But when they signed their letters, they didn't sign J. Baba or Sincerely. They signed them Bow Wow Agnes, or Bow Wow Mansari. Baba limited the number of dogs she could have. Initially, she didn't like dogs, and she really loved them. The number of dogs she was permitted to keep was 4. One day she said to Baba, "There's 5 dogs now on the hill." Baba goes, "Oh, 5 dogs?" She said, "Yes, I'm your 5th dog." So I think I'll end by reading a very short letter and poem that I sent to their surviving Mandali after her passing. And they have to do with our very short Mansari after she won the race. I'll read the short letter and then the short poem. Dear family, I'm writing to you in deeply shared feelings for Baba's dear Mansari, whose home visa came after playing the game, taking only his name, Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. Love, Philip Creager. I actually said Avatar Meher Baba Ni Jai, N-I instead of K-I, because that's the Gujarati form that they would use if they were Gujarati people. And the poem I sent is called Filled with Love. Mansari has gone, but where has she gone? Gone to him, King of hearts, filled with love. Mansari remains, and where she remains? on the hill of our hearts filled with love. Jai Baba.